translate to the word mind. And in fact, for centuries, psychology was called the study of the mind. But the more literal term mind actually comes from a Greek word meaning breath. Because what the Greeks believed is when you came out of your mom's womb and you took in your first breath, that's when you breathed in your mind and your soul. And then on your last breath, on your deathbed, your last breath, you breathe out your soul and your mind. And that's how the mind and the body interact with each other. And this is going to bring up some of the philosophical arguments or questions that we still really haven't answered, even with our modern technologies and our ability to scan brains and all that kind of stuff, is whether or not our mind, okay, what gives us consciousness, the ability to reflect on where we are right now, think about our past, think about our future, all of those things. There's an argument that it's separate from our physical body, that they're two separate entities, that there's this thing we have that is consciousness, the mind and the soul, that supersedes the physical body. And we'll get into the arguments for that approach, which we call a dualistic approach, versus a monolithic approach, which means the mind and the body are one and the same. And we'll look at the arguments for both, and we'll see that this question still has not been answered, at least from a scientific perspective. Psychology is both a science and a profession. And when we get to the different areas of psychology, we'll see that there's psychologists for the workplace. There's psychologists who study mental illness. There's psychologists who study politics and political behavior. And there's a wider range of different areas that are both the profession, but also the scientific approach we do. Kind of the modern definition, if we were to give psychology a modern definition, it would be the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. Scientific meaning that we use some type of procedure that someone else could use later on to see if they can replicate what we found. So it's just kind of a procedure that allows others within the field to then go replicate what we did to see if it's valid, to see if what we found was actually something real. When we talk about behavior, we're talking about the study of overt behavior. So those are things that we can directly observe, such as a child crying or some type of behavior after you introduce a situation to a person. The other part that we study are covert processes or mental processes. These are processes that I, as the researcher, don't have direct access to. And so I have to go through the individual to understand those. So those include things like different type of emotional states, thought processes, thinking and remembering. All are those covert parts of psychology. So, and we'll talk in the field, there's people who ignore mental processes because they don't think that it's worth even looking at. And then there's other people who think that you can't just look at a behavior and know about a person. So we'll look at the different camps that argue for that. Okay. And really, and this is kind of where we'll end for today. Really, we have 4 goals in psychology. The first goal, I can't read. Oops. We want to describe, that's not what that one is, and I'll use kind of what we do with mental disorders to kind of classify them. So let's say we see in a population this common cluster of people who sleep too much or sleep too little. They're not getting proper amount of sleep. They're always kind of melancholy and sad and have hard time with motivation and they tend to make a lot of mistakes because they just don't feel like they're fully there. Okay. And so in this situation, when we describe it, we describe those behaviors and then we try to differentiate them from other types of behaviors that we observe. And let's say this classification of behaviors we just described, we name it as depression. Okay. Well, now that we have a description and we've identified it as something unique to the human experience, that it seems like these clusters of individuals tend to commonly have these problems. The next thing we want to do is we want to understand it. We want to understand what causes it, what causes change in those behaviors. We want to know, again, the biological processes that then give way to this cluster of behaviors that we've observed. So once we understand the causes of it, then we want to be able to predict it. And if we go into the clinical psychology area, this is where we want to try, does a certain medication help with it? Does a certain type of therapy help with it? And so we want to know what variables, what things can be put in place that then can make these symptoms either worse or better. And then, of course, the last step is we want to control it. And this one has always been very controversial within the field of psychology because it hasn't always been used in proper ways. I remember, during the George W. Bush administration, both the American Psychological Association and groups of psychologists were implicated into creating psychological torture techniques that had very negative consequences on the people that they were used to. And the idea was they wanted to control those behaviors in order to get those people to admit to or say what it is they were investigating in those situations. So we also know that, in World War II, the federal government gave an indigenous group gonorrhea to see what the behavioral processes of gonorrhea is. How does that disease progress? And again, in 2019, that group just won a class action lawsuit with the federal government. Because the problem is they gave that disease to all those people, but they never went in and treated them after they figured out how to treat it. So there's centuries of individuals who have had brain problems and stuff like that that have been transmitted from parents to children. And so the whole control area of psychology hasn't always been that ethical, and we'll get into other types of research that have led to less than flattering results. But for the most part, the control part for psychologists is because we want to create positive and healthy changes for individuals and people. And that tends to be the main intent behind this goal. But unfortunately, sometimes it's not. Okay. And just a couple myths about psychology. Psychology is all about mental health. This myth, I understand, does have some credence because when we look at psychologists, about 52% or greater of them are clinical psychologists and counseling psychologists, but about another 45 to 48% don't do anything with mental health. Psychology is not a science, as I explained earlier. We try to use a scientific process in everything we do, including therapy and counseling. And psychologists can read minds. While it is fun to mess with people sometime and say, yeah, I'm reading your mind, psychologists cannot read minds. We can't analyze behavior. I'm not going to sit here and try and psychologicalize anybody. In fact, when we look at social scientists' ability to predict behavior, we do know better than a 3-year-old. We have about an error rate of 86%. And so just so everybody knows, and if there's a psychologist that claims that they're reading your mind or analyzing you, no, either they're messing with you or they're just full of it. So those are the three main myths that we have about psychologists and psychology. And so what I would like to do though, because the rest of these conversations will take full class times and whatnot, is I do want to kind of stop here because I know this is everyone's first day. You're getting settled in. You just had to deal with a syllabus lecture. And so if it's okay with everyone, I think we should stop here for today. And then we can continue our discussion this Wednesday about different types of psychologies, the different philosophies, and the different camps, the different areas of thinking within the field. If that is okay with everybody, you all right with that? You're good? You're good? Okay. These three say we're done, so. 4, yeah, I did, yeah, I said that too. All right, thank you for attending, everyone. We'll get to know everybody this coming Wednesday as we move forward. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see everybody on Wednesday.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Too. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to double check, we won't have anything due this week, correct?
I'm not thinking for this week other than the attendance to class.
Okay.
But I really don't want to, I know it's the first week, so. All right.
All right, great. See you Wednesday.
All right, take care.
Thank you.